We at Edukemy helped in fulfilling the dreams of 51 UPSC 2020 toppers. If you too have a dream to crack the UPSC examination, subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay up to date with your UPSC preparation. क्योंकि तैयारी आपकी जिम्मेदारी हमारी।
Ankit Sharma. I am the instructor of Polity at Edukemy, and in this video we are going to unpack the topic as it is given in front of you, how to prepare polity for UPSC. It's a seemingly simple question but a very complex question when it comes to the execution. Okay, so the agenda of this video is to give you some idea or understanding of what the basic elements of a preparation for the examination look like. All right, so to help us answer that question is the agenda of this video. What are the key points or the key takeaways that you will have by the end of this short video? These are the key points that we are trying to cover through the medium of this video. First point is, what is polity and governance? Just basically not defining it, not explaining it, not elaborating it, but just pointing out how polity and governance has been basically defined in the UPSC notification for the prelims examination and the mains examination. The second is just giving a summary of the syllabus of polity and governance. The summary of the syllabus of polity and governance implies that we're going to take all the points of the syllabus and very briefly compose them into a single headline or a title from which all the points converge, right? It's like understanding the super category under which all the particular elements fall, and that is basically just a small discussion about the syllabus of polity and governance. For a detailed discussion upon the syllabus, not only of polity and governance but of general studies paper 2, there's a video which will be available separately. Okay, then the third question that we ask and answer is, what is the material that we have to refer to? What are the reference texts? What are the various sources, newspapers, etc., that we have to read to prepare for polity and governance? Then fourth question is, how is polity different in different stages of the examination? A very common query and a natural one is, how do we prepare for prelims, mains, and perhaps even interview for polity and governance, and what are the different approaches? What are the commonalities between these three stages and what are the differences? Okay, so we'll answer that question there. Then after that, quality of questions. What are the categories in which all the questions in polity can be divided? For instance, the factual questions, conceptual questions, current affairs based questions, etc. Okay, so these are basically what we'll discuss over here. And point number 6 is relevance of polity outside paper 1. In case you have a good understanding of polity, a background in, let's say, having read the Constitution of India, etc., which means to say that you're very strong with this area of polity and governance, what are the other areas in which you will find benefit of having a good understanding of this area? This is what we will cover in point number 6, which is relevance of polity and governance outside paper 3. Okay, so basically let's just do a very simple unpacking of what we have to understand by the concept of polity and governance. Now, in the UPSC notification, the concept of polity and governance has been given in these two categories, the prelims paper and the mains paper. The mains paper we will deal with in some time, but let's take a look at the concept of, or the description of prelims papers, polity and governance, right? It says that Indian polity and governance dash constitution, political system, panchayati raj, public policy, rights issues, etc., right? This is the only thing that is given in the notification which pertains to the preliminary examination, which covers polity and governance. As you know that this is rather than a kind of a strict or exhaustive definition of what has to be asked, is only a kind of an indication or a hint as to what will be covered in the prelims paper, right? If we have to, look at a lot of questions in the previous year question papers on the prelims examination, a lot of them will fall in the category of etc., and therefore it is an open-ended kind of a thing. It doesn't have a obligatory sense to it, it just has an indicative sense to it. Okay, so this is what is written in the prelims paper correspondence to polity and governance. What is written in the mains paper? Now in the mains paper, paper number 3 of the mains paper is covering polity and governance. But in the general studies paper, it is paper number 2. So this is a common confusion among students, whether it is paper number 3 or paper number 2. Let us clarify it once and for all. In the mains examination, it is overall in chronology paper number 3, but in the general studies paper, it is paper number 2. Okay. So these are the two different names by which it is referred, and sometimes people interchange them, often causing confusion. Overall, it is paper number 3, and in the general studies in the general studies paper, it is paper number 2. Okay, so this paper number 2 in general studies has 3 terms associated to polity and governance. Number 1, governance; number 2, constitution; and number 3, polity. Okay. So these are the only 3 terms which are given in the syllabus as a title of governance, constitution, and polity. Let's look at the various elements of the syllabus. Now, what we have done here is very briefly, okay, we have tried to find out 11 basic elements which are, which are the headers of whatever is asked under the syllabus for governance, constitution, and polity. Number 1 is the Constitution of India. This includes the subjects such as the fundamental rights, the preamble, the directive principle of state policy, the fundamental duties, etc. Right? This is basically what is covered under the first part of the syllabus, the Indian Constitution. What is the second part? Second part is the division of powers, or in detail we can call it the part of the syllabus in which all the questions regarding the center and the state relationship are asked. For instance, if there's a question on federalism, or there's a question on the distribution of funds between the center and the state, or there is a question on, let's say, the disputes arising out of the misunderstanding in the GST, etc. All of this will cover under the center of the state. Why do we call it division of powers? Because the constitution itself envisages a division of power between the center and the state. For instance, the 7th schedule of the constitution classifies things as center, union list, or the state list, okay, and the concurrent list. So this kind of an understanding is all that we have to deal with. The relationship between the union and the state, or the center and the state, is covered under the second part of the syllabus. The third part of the syllabus contains the separation of powers. Okay, the difference between division of powers and the separation of powers is this: that in division of powers there is a center state relationship. In separation of power, we have to understand the relationship between the 3 organs of a government: the legislative, executive, and judiciary. The 3 organs of the state: legislative, executive, and judiciary. What we have to basically understand under the context of separation of powers is what are the areas in which they have to work together, and what are the areas in which they have individual authorities. So for instance, all the questions regarding independence of judiciary are going to be classified under the concept of separation of powers. If there is a question regarding the accountability of the executive to the parliament, it is a question under the separation of powers. So these are questions which are very frequently asked in both the prelims and the mains examination, and this is more of a conceptual coverage rather than a factual coverage. After we come to the fourth point, which is comparative constitutionalism. This is basically how does Indian constitution compare with other, mostly democratic constitution like the Constitution of United Kingdom, the Constitution of United States of America, France, etc. Okay, so for instance, there were questions in previous years which were comparing the idea. For example, how does the Indian idea of secularism differ from the French idea of secularism? More specifically, the question was, what can the French idea of secularism learn from the Indian idea of secularism? Okay, so whenever there is this compare, contrast, etc., it is covered under this particular header of the syllabus. After that, we have the legislature, executive, and judiciary. Having covered the concept of the separation of powers between 3 organs, we will cover the details about the members of these 3 organs are elected and appointed. Okay, so these will cover areas, for instance, how are people elected into the legislature, how are ministers appointed, how are judges appointed, what are their roles and functions and powers within the capacity given to them by the Constitution of India. This is the 5th point. The 6th point will deal with bodies. For instance, the Finance Commission, the Election Commission, the Reserve Bank of India, which is more in the domain of economy, but certain questions can be asked. For instance, in this prelims examination, there was a question related to the Reserve Bank of India, which was falling under the domain of polity. Okay, so what are the different bodies or institutions which are involved in the process of governance, and what are the different categories of those institutions? Constitutional institutions, statutory institutions, regulatory institutions, and quasi-judicial institutions. These are the four fundamental categories in which all the public institutions in India are divided, and they will be covered under this header. Okay. After that, we have the concept of the Representation of People's Act. It's a very simple and small coverage which deals with certain limitations and conditions which are applicable to people who are fighting elections in India. Also covers certain powers of the Election Commission of India. After that, we have government policies. For example, the question on National Education Policy (NEP 2020), which was asked in last year mains, was asked from this kind of a syllabus part. And after that, there are development processes which include things like NGOs, SHGs, etc., which are self-help groups, and how are they being used by the Indian society to make sure that there are methods and means of satisfying the needs of all Indians. Okay, so this is development processes. Then there is a very important topic of welfare state. Now, welfare state, maybe we will cover all the schemes which the government of India has launched. For instance, when we read the magazine Yojana, all the schemes, all the methods by which the Indian government is trying to make sure that the basic necessities are given to every Indian, that will all fall under the category of welfare state. For example, the NREGA would be under the welfare state. And last but not the least, and a very important topic, is the topic of governance. Now, in governance, you have the questions which are relating to, let's say, e-governance, citizens charter, accountability, transparency. All of this is going to be a part of the last and final point in the polity paper, which is governance. So you can take a look at these 11 elements are a very, very brief summary of what are the possible headings that can be given to all the syllabus in governance, constitution, and polity. Next, we move on to the question of reference text. What do we have to read? Now, the first thing that we have to keep in mind is that the best texts that are going to serve you till the end of the examination are the notes that you make by yourself, whether you are attending a classroom, whether it is online or offline. If you're doing self-studies and you're referring to the various books, it will not be sufficient for you to underline the books only. You will have to make your own handwritten notes from the lectures, from the books, from the newspapers. And these handwritten notes, this compilation, will be the best and the most loyal value that you will create in terms of your reference material. Okay, so this is at the top of the list. Number 2, newspaper editorials. Now, 2 newspapers in specific, the Hindu and the Indian Express. Every day there are editorials and opinions written by public intellectuals and former government servants, civil servants, etc., unpacking the various issues which are falling under the domain of governance and polity. For instance, the one of the editorials written recently was on the FCRA. One was written on the constitutional challenge to the farm laws, etc. Okay, now you have to develop an ability to understand these editorials, not all of them, but certainly if you want to create that extra edge into answer writing, especially for the mains examination, to deal with these editorials becomes an important part. You will not be able to master them in such a short time, but even if you have a considerable list of these editorials which you can carry with you in your mind upon one or the other topic of the polity and then convert them into your handwritten notes, that is going to be a final way of dealing with any complex topic in polity and governance, and therefore it is highly recommended. Okay, for instance, there's something called the Indian Express Explained, which is a beautiful description of various things. For instance, contempt of court. What is contempt of court? What is the difference between civil and criminal contempt? These kind of things are given in Indian Express Explained. Okay, similarly, there is a FAQ section in the Hindu on the weekends, in which many questions and answers are related to many topics are given, which are beautifully analyzed and unpacked, and that is going to be another very important reference material. These are the kind of things that you can think of while you're preparing for the examination. Now, The third point is the Constitution of India itself. Now, what basically I suggest generally is that you can download a PDF of the Constitution of India from internet and keep it as handy material with you while you are doing any other kind of reading or listening or learning about the polity paper. Just read what Article 14 says, just read what Article 19 says. Some of that is very, very simple reading. It is unnecessarily created as a myth that the Constitution of India is a very technical document. Certainly it can be technical in certain cases, but the parts of the Constitution of India which are relevant for the UPSC examination are not very technical. Okay, Article 14 is very shortly written, Article 21 is written in maybe not more than 2 sentences. So these are things which you can read and memorize and learn and understand, and they will be of final value to you in terms of the reading material. Okay, so you can download a PDF or you can buy what we call a Bare Act, which gives the provisions of the Constitution of India as it is released by the Parliament occasionally. Make sure that it is an updated version, so all the amendments etc. are incorporated in that particular document. One book that can be referred in this case is the P.N. Bakshi. You can take the P.N. Bakshi, which is basically a Bare Act with some commentary, but if you are comfortable reading a PDF, that will suffice. Okay. After that, one of the popular and very important books for the Constitution is Lakshmikant, though in the last few years it is increasingly diminishing in its relevance, but still in the absence of any other book, it is still considered one of the important books while you are covering the concept of Indian polity. So this I think you must already be aware about. Then there are the TV discussions and debates by especially these 3 channels: the Lok Sabha TV, the Rajya Sabha TV, and the Sunset TV. Okay, every day there is an issue about governance and polity. Every evening or the next evening there is a debate arranged by these TV channels covering that kind of a potential, pros and cons of a particular movement taken by the government or something like that. Or you have to listen to these debates, at least develop an ability to understand some of them, and this gives you a 360-degree view of what are the possible dimensions of each issue. Especially it is very relevant for the mains and the interview part. Another good website, it is a think tank, PRS Legislative. PRS Legislative is one of the top think tanks in the country which deals with the processes and products of the Parliament of India and anything. For instance, if you have to look about the provisions of the Juvenile Justice Act amendments which have been given recently, you can just go to the PRS Legislative website and look at those amendments, and the very brief and concise summary of them is uploaded. I cannot recommend enough how important PRS Legislative is for certain parts of the polity syllabus. Then again, people who are interested in developing a kind of a conceptual understanding, who have spare time or are just curious or have a law background or a political theory background, can refer to Durgadas Basu as a kind of a big book which gives you conceptual clarity upon certain ideas. I will not recommend it to people who are not trained into reading this kind of a thing because it may be a little perplexing to start with, but people who feel the need to involve more deeply with the Constitution of India, you can refer to Durgadas Basu's Indian Constitution. And after that, you can take a pick of any current affair magazine that you want, but be sure that that choice is made wisely, because a lot of the information which is given there cannot be coherently presented in the examination. So you can take a pick according to your own discretion, and it is not necessary. If you are covering the first 7 parts or even the first 4 or 5 parts on your own, then your handwritten notes are going to be the final repository of any kind of a magazine that you will need. Again, I'm emphasizing your own notes are the best version of notes because it is written by your hand, it is committed to your memory while you were writing it, and therefore they are the most important part of the entire exercise. Okay, so if you have a very good handwritten notes on your own self, you don't need the assistance of any magazine. Now, what the next part of our thing is polity in different stages of the examination. How do we have how do we calibrate or strategize our preparation for different parts of the examination? Okay, so you can just pause the video and take a look at the 4 options, 1, 2, 3, 4, and try to answer the question, which one of these 4 options is the one you will choose to strategize your preparation for polity in different stages of the examination. You can pause the video now. Okay, the correct answer over here is, of course, number 4. Okay, number 4, which means to say this, that before you even think about preparing for prelims for polity or prepare for mains for polity, you have to deal with the Constitution of India, the governance and the polity part as a part of the examination in an integrated manner. You can't think about this as 3-4 categories which are already determined. Unless you have some understanding of what these concepts mean, you should not think about studying separately for the prelims examination and separately for the mains examination. It is a big error. It is possible that you end up studying only for the prelims examination and you qualify it, but you're not able to write any answers for the mains examination. And if you keep studying for the mains examination, you're not even able to qualify the prelims. Okay, so one dimensional focus is a big no at this point of preparation. When you are assumingly starting your preparation, you have to first look at the subject of polity and governance as a whole without demarcating them. You can then naturally arrive at a point where you can easily individually demarcate how to study for prelims separately and how to study for mains separately, but you cannot start with a point like that. Okay, that is something that you have to very careful about, because a lot of aspirants make that mistake and then they have to repent. Okay, so point number 4 is the correct answer over here. That is the answer to the strategy. Now we come to the final part, which is the quality of the questions. Now, basically, when I say quality of the questions, I have divided all the forms of questions which are asked in the polity paper in these 6 categories. For instance, you can understand the fact-based question. A question like right to equality falls under which article? Article 14. Very simple question, a fact-based question. Another could be a concept-based questions, which has to be, which has to use some analytical or explanatory techniques to give an answer to that question. And these are the questions which are increasing in number year after year. So that's why one of the recommendations over by everyone who's dealing with polity sincerely is that you have to now start paying attention to the ideas and the concepts, and mere roting or mugging up of the facts will not help you clear the examination. Okay, then there are essay type questions, which are basically opinion based questions, which do not ask you the number of articles or the case laws, etc., but they want you to indulge into some kind of opinion based understanding. Why do you think India has the problem of poverty, or what do you think is the reason why India cannot implement uniform civil code? All these questions are questions in which your opinion is being tested. They are few in number, but still there are some enough to make a category out of it. So you have to be prepared to answer questions like these, which test your opinion. After that, broad interpretation of syllabus. What does this imply? We have seen recently that a lot of questions in the polity paper, both in the prelims and the mains paper, are incorporating questions or subjects from, let's say, law. For instance, a legal theory. There was a question on judicial custody in this prelims examination, which is a very strictly speaking legal part rather than a governance part. So law, jurisprudence, legal theory, these are the new entrants in the examination. A lot of questions in the examination are being asked with this kind of a thing in mind also now. Then political theory questions. For instance, in this prelims examination, there was a question about what is a state. Okay, and it was through and through a question from political theory and political science. So when we say broad interpretation of the syllabus, what we mean is that reading the polity syllabus cannot be strictly constricted to understand that it is only polity and governance, but political theory, legal theory, jurisprudence is also now becoming a part of the syllabus if you interpret it a little broadly. Okay, and then the final part is questions with the second last part is the questions with the current affairs base, which basically means the questions which are directly or indirectly inspired by the current affairs. Okay, so of course, one thing that goes without saying is that almost all questions in polity and governance can be traced back to an event which happened in the last 12 to 18 months. Okay, so if you take the final cap, the ultimate cap upon this, if you keep it as 18 months, and if you prepare for all the current affairs of the preceding 18 months, and if you prepare them well by developing a conceptual understanding, by able to link them to other current affairs, then it is absolutely possible that you can see all the questions of the prelims and the mains examination coming either directly or indirectly from the current affairs. Okay, let's take a look at an example of what we mean by a current affairs question. Okay, you can pause your video and look at this question. Okay, if you take a look at this question, you will understand how, I'm going to demonstrate to you how this has been a part of the current affairs. The question deals around the concept of the right to the city. Okay, the right to the city is a fundamental point in all the three options. Now, I'm not going to go into a point where I'm going to discuss this question, but this is a question in prelims 2021. Now, let us look at the current affairs inspiration behind this question. Students, it is a myth when people say that polity prelims doesn't have current affairs anymore. Polity mains doesn't have current affairs anymore. It is a total and an absolute myth. What the UPSC is doing is it is packaging current affairs in such a manner that it becomes very hard for any person who's not trained properly to identify how a question has appeared by being inspired from a current affairs event, but how an event that happened in the country in the last 12 to 18 months has given inspiration for a question like this. Okay, so if you read the question, let me just point out to this particular slide, and you can read this point, right to the city. Now, this has been taken from the final pages that Edukemy released before the prelims examination, and you can also look at the current affairs event in which something like the right to the city was in news. Okay, you can pause your video and take a look at this. Okay, so this is an event that happened within the last 12 to 18 months before the examination, and the concept of the right to city gained currency. Okay, this was the concept which started showing up in news again. And what the UPSC has done is it has not asked the question directly from the judgment given by the Supreme Court, but it has taken a concept from that debate and asked a question on that. Okay, so therefore this is a typical example of a beautifully constructed question from the current affairs which gives the false impression or the myth that current affairs is not any more relevant for the examination. Okay, this is a myth which we have to overcome, which will make us understand that reading the news, reading the reporting in the newspapers, paying attention to the current and the recent events is only more important now than ever. Okay, what is additionally needed is an ability to find out how to also go back in the conceptual background of answering questions like these. Okay, so this is very important in terms of dealing with the examination. After that, you can take a look at this example also. This is what we can call a direct current affairs related question. Okay? So, since the problem of the electronic voting machine was something that was in currency in 2017, and therefore a direct question regarding the role of the Election Commission of India, etc., has been asked in that sense. Okay, and then the last category that we come to is questions with a political sensitivity. Now, I just want to end with this kind of a discussion that there may be some questions, or a lot of aspirants have this question, that how do we write an answer so that it doesn't become politically charged, so that we don't end up offending or or setting the wrong chord with the examiner, etc. So yes, that is one category that we have to prepare ourselves. And the UPSC generally, as a rule, does not have many questions which are controversial in nature, but there could be some questions which can have that kind of a character and which do test your ability to write a good answer without getting caught in the politics of controversy. Okay, so take a look at this question. This is a question about the Uniform Civil Code, and this is a question which could be considered political sensitive because it is asking for the possible factors. Okay, now no debate in India in UCC goes without controversy, and therefore you have to be very careful to develop your answer writing methods into dealing or developing a language which is not offensive, does not cross a line, but also makes a point which is important in terms of dealing with the answer. Okay, so at the end of our discussion, we take the final category of our video, which is the relevance of polity paper outside paper 3. Whatever you read in polity, how is it relevant outside the syllabus under which it is placed? Okay, first and foremost, in essay, you have a lot of essays with regard to governance, secularism, equality, liberty, etc. And all of these are concepts which you study in polity. So needless to say that if you are well prepared for polity, you are well prepared for some of the topics in essay also. After that, general studies paper 1, history, in which you have certain questions which are also overlapping in terms of the syllabus coverage from polity. For instance, the Government of India Act 1935. Now, this is something that you read both in polity as antecedents to the current constitution and also in history as a part of modern Indian history. Okay, so some overlap exists here also. After that, there is a very clear overlaps in the ethics paper, which is the GS4 paper, in which, for instance, you have questions from governance, RTI, citizens charter, etc. Now, governance, good governance, e-governance, all of these topics are given both in GS paper 2, which is polity paper, and GS paper 4, which is ethics paper, right? So if you have a good amount of notes collected on them for one paper, you are set to go for the next paper, right? So this is a very, very good overlap. Needless to say, interview. Now, if you look at the transcripts of people after they give the interview, all these transcripts are available on the internet. You will find a lot of these questions have a polity character. They will ask you complex questions about the Constitution of India. They will sometimes ask you about the adjectives associated with the Republic of India, or what are the types of liberties given in the preamble, or what are the two types of equalities given in the preamble, right? Many questions appear in the interview, and this re-emphasizes the fact that you have to be very, very clear that you can't prepare only for the prelims examination or the mains examination or separately prepare for them. You have to develop an integrated and a consolidated manner in which you should be able to answer some questions related to polity in the interview also. Okay, and of course the last is option like law, public administration, and political science. If you cover these options, you are covering a lot of what is going to be studied in polity. Okay, so that's a very, very general overlap between these three topics and the subject of polity. All right, so this is the end of our discussion, and what we have covered over here is how to prepare polity. We have given you several ideas in points, and these are the basic takeaways of the video that we are wrapping up now. If you feel that you have gained some value or understanding, like, share and subscribe. You can leave your comments about what you think can be added to this video, or any other ideas that you want to reflect or have a discussion about, and we'll be there in the comments also, trying to take this discussion forward. Okay, thank you for your time and patience.